Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today, in Masechtas Ksuvas daf Nun Beis, we are going to begin on the very bottom of Nun Alf Amud Beis. In the Ksuva, regarding of Kohenes, Ahad Rinech L'Medina Sech. If she is captured, and because she was violated, even though it was against her will, when it comes to a situation of a husband who's a Kohen, she is now usher to him. And therefore, in the Ksuba, not that she goes back to as a wife, but rather he has an obligation to make sure that she is able to go back to her family. So, Omer Abaya, Alman Kohen Gadol, Chayav Lifdaisa. When there's an obligation to redeem your wife, is it even if the marriage was with sin? So if you have an almana who's not supposed to be married to a Kohen Gadol, it doesn't make any difference. The din still is that the Kohen Gadol still has to redeem his wife. Shani Kairaba, because I apply these words of a Kohenes, Ahad Rinech L'Medina Sech, that just like a Kohen who is married rightfully to a woman, but unfortunately being violated, she's now usher to him. So it's the same thing over here, that you have an almana to a Kohen Gadol. She was in captivity. He has to redeem her as well. So in this, Rashi says that we learn later on in Perek Almana Nizainis, Yesh Ksuba, there is a Ksuba, Utanai Ksuba, and also the conditions in which it stipulates Dile Mishkol Umefik Koi, that when she leaves, Avol Tanai Ksuba Doleikum Kamei, is in order to remain. Kigoin Mizonos Rafua Armin Biavamos Deleisla. Okay, so we're gonna much later on understand that Rashi. But nonetheless, Abaye says that a Monik Kohen Gadol, that's the din. However, as we continue Nun Beis Amud Aleph, Mamzeres and the Sinai Israel, in which that relationship is completely wrong, as Rashi says, Afgav the Isla Ksuba Utanai Ksuba, even though there is a Ksuba and a Tanai Ksuba also when it comes to this relationship, there's no Tanai Ksuba Dili Perkaina when it comes to redeeming her. Dimikor lo ishtabidla. So when it comes to this relationship, therefore, the man is not obligated to redeem her, and the reason is Pashit Shein Ani Karaba Voice Vinech Intai. Because when it comes to Yisrael, if she was violated and it was ba'oinus, so the din is that she's mutter to her husband. But in this situation, because it's a mamzeres and the sin in Yisrael, in which she was always usher to her husband, so the din is no. So everyone holds, we're gonna like this opinion when it comes to a Yisrael relationship that was usher, that the din is that he's not going to be chayav to redeem her. However, Rabbi argues regarding the case of Alamada the Kohen Gadol. Rabbi Aimer Kol she'isr shibuya garimla chayav lifdaisa. Isr davar acher garimla eno chayav lifdaisa. It's all totally on why is she usher. If the only reason why she's usher is because she was in captivity, then you have an obligation to redeem her, which is a case of a regular Kohen who married rightfully a girl he was allowed to marry. However, the mother to Kohen Gadol, over here, that it wasn't the captivity that made her usher. She was really usher to him before. It was an Isser Lav. And therefore, according to the sheet of Rabba, no, he would not be chayav. So question 8. Hanaisa isha hasuraloi be'isser lav diaraisa him chayav leperkaina mitanai ksuba. So as you said, by an Eish Yisrael, you're not chayav. However, Eish Kayin, or Kohen Gadol to Almana, is a machlokas. So Gemara says, well, lema katanoi. Maybe this machlokas and Bain Rabba is telling the following machlokas tanoi. Hamadir es ishtoi. A person made a neder against his wife, so therefore he's not supposed to get any hana from her. So in that case of Nishbis, let's say she's not allowed to get any hana from him, and she is in captivity, so Rabbi Lezer Omer Poidev and Subasa. So you still have an obligation to redeem her. It doesn't make any difference. Even though at the end of the day you're going to end up divorcing her because of this neder, doesn't make any difference. You still redeem her. However, yes, you do give her a ksuba. However, you do not have to redeem her. You don't redeem her. And the Gemara is going to explain later on why. So Rabbi Nassim Shaltias Sumchus. So he presented this question to Sumchus. Rabbi Yeshua that Rabbi Yeshua says that you give her ksuba, but you don't redeem her. So kishhadira, when you made the neder, ubasayf nishmas, and then she became captive. Oh, benishmas ubasayf hadira. What came first? Did the neder of not getting hana from them, was that something that took place before being in captivity or afterwards? Yarmali li shemati. I didn't know or hear the answer to this question. However, v'nir devarim shehediru b'seiv nishbis. L'chayr, it makes more sense that this is a case where the neder was already kicked in, and therefore it became questionable since it was already an isser of deriving hana. So maybe at that point you don't have to redeem her anymore because hana is being given in that situation. So it must be that is the case, that it happened first, the neder. Because if you think about it the other way around, if you could have a woman in captivity and all of a sudden you can make a neder to aser hana, so people are going to end up doing this trick. Every time their wife is in captivity, they'll just immediately afterwards make a neder, an iser hana, and therefore they won't have to redeem her anymore. So no man will ever have to redeem her. So the whole possible scenario, and therefore it certainly would be mechuyev in that case to redeem her. So therefore it must be talking about in a situation where first the neder was made, and then only afterwards she was in captivity. So my love. So now if that's what the machlokas is, if that's what the case is, so is it not b'mader eishes kayin k'miflagi? Maybe they're arguing about a situation by an eishes kayin. Says Rashi, but kayin shehidar es ishto. So you have the kohen that made a neder against his wife. The Ibi Yisrael, because if we're talking about Yisrael made this neder, lo amar Rabbi Lezer paida, then Rabbi Lezer would not say redeem her. Shari eina nikaraba tanaik suvi Yisrael v'esvinech intay. Since he made a neder, he can't take her back. So it can't be talking about Yisrael, because the Yisrael cannot take her back. The whole notion of a Kohen cannot take her back anyway, so therefore it must be talking about the case of a Kohen, whether or not she can be redeemed. And therefore this perhaps is what this machlokas above is. Whether or not, for example, in case of an almana to a Kohen Gadol, whether or not that Kohen Gadol has an obligation to redeem her. So, because when it comes to a Kohen, regardless, the ksuba says that she will go back to her medina, to her province, but not that she'll go back to the man, because she wouldn't be able to go back to the man because the neder was made. So it must be the machlokas whether or not a person is obligated to redeem his wife is totally on this machlokas as well of Rabbi Lezer and Yeshua. Look, Hachamayaskinan here, this case actually, and Rabbi Lezer and Yeshua really are not arguing on the situation of Abai and Rabba, but rather Kigun Shenadra Ihi. What happened was she was the one that made the neder. That's why it's a little bit confusing the language over here. But she's the one that made the neder. Vikim la hu, and the husband accepted it. He said, "Okay, fine, not a problem." Rabbi Lezer Savar hu nois an etzba ben shineha. He put a finger between literally shineha, the teeth. Because you got your finger bit. In other words, it's the man's fault that he accepted this, and therefore, because of that, since he could have refused, he could have been made for the neder, but since he was makayim it, so therefore it's his fault, and because of that, he has to redeem her. It was actually her that literally put the finger between the teeth. In other words, she got her finger bit. The point is, and that expression just means that she shouldn't have made the neder initially. And therefore, because she's the one that, even though it's true, he was Mekayim, he didn't have to, but she didn't have to initiate the neder either. So the fact that it was done that way, so therefore she will lose out. If she's in captivity, she will not be redeemed. So Maya Vidita. So the question is, Maya Vidita. It's like, what could she have done, right? Vasu Oimer Rab Nasin Shalti as Sumchas. Again, let's go back to the question that was posed to Sumchas. Kashem Rabbi Yeshua Nasan Lo Ksubasa, that the Ksubas give him Ena Poideh, and you don't read Podeha, and you don't redeem her, you don't have to redeem her. Kishediru Basayv Nishmas, O Shem Nishmas Basayv Hedira. B'Omer, he said Lo Shemati. I'm not sure which one took first. However, as we said before, V'i din Nadra Ihi, but the question is, if she was the one that made the neder, because he said, oh, what's the problem? That if she was being in captivity and then he would make this neder, so then everyone would do this trick. But this is not the situation, because if we're establishing that she's the one that initiated it, which would be kind of hard to understand. She initiated this neder after she was already in captivity. Okay, but if that's the situation, the reality is he's not the one that initiated, and therefore it's not going to be a form of trickery, because she's the one that did it. El olam de adra ihu. It has to be not that she was the one that initiated, but rather he did. So therefore, if that's the case, again, we're back to our case. Abai and Rabbi could still fit into both these opinions. Abai, who he said holds that when it comes to a Kohen, to a Kohen Gadol, to an Almana, he does have to redeem her. Almana Kohen Gadol, when it comes to that situation, everyone holds you do have to redeem. Of course, Rabbi doesn't agree to that, but he's saying that they all agree, namely Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shua, that in the situation if you have a Kohen Gadol to an Almana, certainly you would have to redeem. And the reason is because, as Abai said before, because it falls under the stipulation of a Hadrinech L'Bedin Osech. So therefore it makes sense that she should be redeemed. So everyone agrees to that. The Chayv L'Ftaisa. Mamzer says in Yisrael, when it comes to the case of Mamzeres in the Sina, because you cannot apply because you can't marry her, you weren't supposed to marry her, she's an Isser. So because of that, everyone holds you don't have to redeem her. So according to Bayit, no one argues about those two cases. The truth is, if you made a neder, and we're talking about a Kohen to a wife, everyone also holds that you're obligated to redeem her. That's comparable to the case of an almana to a kohen gadol. So he actually holds that when the case of a neder, you are obligated. Ki pligi b'mader eishes Yisrael. So again, in that situation, by an eishes kohen, you could still apply the din of a hadrinech l'bedin osech, because that's what's going to happen when you redeem her. Ki pligi b'mader eishes Yisrael. Because the problem is, Ramader eishes Yisrael, you cannot bring her back to your house. Rabbi Eliezer ozol basar mikara. Rabbi Eliezer says it doesn't make any difference. You still have to redeem her, because we go basar mikara. At the time you wrote the ksuba, at that moment, if she was captured at that second, you could take her back, since the neder wasn't made yet. Rabbi Yeshua ozol basar b'soif. And b'sof is, at the end of the day, there's a neder against her, and therefore, now that she's in captivity, the din is that you cannot bring her back to your house, and therefore there's no chiyuv of being poided. And Rabbi Matar Tatame, Almana Kohen Gadol Mamzeres and Sinai Yisrael Kol Yamul Pligadenu Chayim Lift Daisa, because that's what he says, that even when it comes to a Kohen Gadol, does not have to redeem her, because it's something in which, as we said, it wasn't the captivity which made her usher, it was something before that made her usher. So ki plig b'mader ben eishes kohen ben eishes Yisrael. According to him, it doesn't matter. The argument could be also by an eishes Yisrael. Rabbi Eliezer azul basar mikar, Rabbi Yeshua azul basar b'saif. Fine. Weiter. Nishbiz chayv leftaisa. Let me just make sure there's no questions over here. So there's been dichrin. Fine. Okay. No questions. So nish b'schayv liftoisa. So one of the things, as we just established, is that if your wife is in captivity, you have to redeem her. B'chulu. Tanabon. Now, the husband has that obligation. How about if the husband dies? Did the Yisayimim have to redeem her? Tanabon. Nishbis b'chay bala. If she was in captivity while her husband was still alive, and therefore there was an obligation on that husband to have redeemed her before he died, then he died, so it depends. Hikr ba'bala, if the husband was informed, he was aware that she was in captivity, while he was alive, obviously, then if that's Hikr ba'bala, then Yorshim Chaim Lefdoisa. Because once he knows about it, he should have redeemed her immediately. And now after the fact that he died, so now it's the Yorshim's responsibility, because that responsibility kicked in the lifetime of the husband. Lo hikr babala ein yorshim chayav leftoisa. However, in a situation where they don't, the husband didn't know about it, and then he died, so then according to this, it's not necessary for the Yisayimim to redeem her, because the husband didn't know about it, because the whole chiyuv was only on the husband, and it had to be that he knew about her being in captivity. Levi Silver lamevid uvda ki ha masnisa. So, according to Levi, he was actually thinking that it would make sense that we should paskin in accordance to what we just said. Armalei Rav Hachi Amar Chabibi. This is what Chabibi said. Rashi says Rav Chia Shu Doidai Achi Aviv was his uncle, his father's brother. Leis Hilchas Aki Hamasnisa. The halacha is actually not like that. El Kihad Sanya Nishbis La'achar Misas Bala. Let's say she was in captivity already after the husband died, then ein hayisem chayav leftoisa. So in that situation, certainly we say that the children do not have to redeem her, because she was only in captivity after the husband died. But then it goes even further. Now that even if, let's say, she was in captivity while her husband was alive, and then afterwards he died, so ein hayisem chayav leftoisa. Now, it's mashma, it doesn't make any difference, hikr or lo hikr. They never have to do it. Because again, in the ksuba, it says that she will be returned back to him as his wife. But that's not possible because he's dead. So therefore, the chiyuv mezonos, the chiyuv of redeeming her, rather, will not take place on the Yisayimim. The Yisayimim will never have to do so. So again, in the event, let's make sure we get this down. If she was captured after the husband died, nishbis l'achar bala, so never does that have to happen. But even if she was captured while her husband was alive, but then he died, so which basically is saying, according to this, you never have to redeem her. Okay, let's look at question 9. Ha'im yorshim chayav liftois es imam hashavuya b'nechsi avihem. So he says like this: Nishbis achar misas ha'av enu chayavim. Certainly, if she was in captivity after the father died, the Yisayimim are not obligated. Nishbis b'chayav pukta. However, as we just said, it's really machlokas if, let's say, she was in captivity while the husband was still alive. And then it says in parentheses, V'im lo nadalo shenishbis kodim shemeis l'kol yam enu chayavim. So if it's lo hikr, even they hold you're not going to be chayav. Okay. Tanaman. Nishbis. So let's say a woman was in captivity. V'hayim avakshim menu, and they're asking for a large sum of money. Ad asar b'dameha. However, we evaluate her worth, but it was 10 times her worth. So pamishayin apaida. You have no choice. You have an obligation to redeem her, even though it's an absorbent amount of money. And kind of elach ratza ain't a point. If she's in captivity again, it's your choice. You don't have to do it, but if you do, you can. Rashi says, interesting. There's only a one-time deal, a one and done. You redeem her once, but if you want to redeem her again, that's up to you. But when you do redeem her, it's even for a very, very high amount, you still have to redeem her. Now, interestingly enough, as we continue to Nun Beis and Beis, he says, one second, we will only have you redeem her up to her value. Because if people who are kidnappers realize that there's this obligation, so they're going to come up with some ridiculous amount of money, and they know they're going to get it. And therefore, in order to get into the psyche of the criminals, they know that if they ask for too much, they're not going to get anything. Therefore, it forces them to at least give a smaller amount, to ask for a smaller amount. So, what do we see? Which is mashma, that if the ransomers, they say, I want you to pay for her actual worth, you do have to do so. Afagav, which is mashma, even if it's more than the ksuba that you owe her. Raminhi nishbis, let's say she's captive menu adasar b'ksubasa, and they ask 10 times the ksuba. So parmisha and poida mekan me'elch ratza poida ratza ena poida. Rav Shimon Gamliel oimer imahayu pirkaina kenegik ksubasa poida v'imlav ena poida. Not just her worth, but it also is supposed to be keneged ksuba. Now that line wasn't mentioned before according to this shita. So the question is this also a requisite? That it's not only the exact amount of her worth, but also it has to be not exceed the ksuba. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel trade kule isle. According to him, there's actually 2 kulas. So in fact, you're right. Both apply. Says Rashi, lo yoser al demeha, she royally macher b'shuk. So Rashi explains what that means. Lo yoser al ksubasa. Weiter. So trei kuli islay. So loksachai lift. If she's sick, so another obligation the husband has, he has to heal her. Tanaban. Almana. Now let's say the husband died. We know that nizenis menechsi assignment. We have to provide mizonos. The assignment have to give her mizonos and to support her until she collects her ksuba. There's this obligation. The tzrich refuah. And they also need to heal her. Harahika mezainis. It has the same din as mezonos. And therefore, both of them are important for survival. When it comes to refuah, which has a set amount, nisrapis miksubasa, so she can be healed from the monies of her ksuba. Shein lo kitzba harahika mezainis. However, if it's not a set amount, then it has the same din of mezonos, because mezonos has no set amount. So a non-set healing, which is constant, is like mezonos also, which is constant. Rabbi Yochanan also hakazas dam be'eretz Yisrael k'refuah she'ein lo kitzvah. So when it comes to the bloodletting in Eretz Yisrael, that was considered like a refuah she'ein lo kitzvah, which has no set amount. And therefore, for that, the din is if she does bloodletting, so they have to provide that. That form of refuah, just like mezonos. Karevi de Rabbi Yochanan havilahu itas abba dehavisrich refuah. So this woman needed to be healed. Kol yoyma every day also committed Rabbi Yochanan. So every day she came in front of Rabbi Yochanan. Malhu azilu kutsule midil raife. Go and set a fee. For the doctor. So Rabbi Yochanan sinu atzmenu ke'archa hadayanim. So it sounds like you're almost making yourself like a lawyer. It says Rashi, oiv echad mibali hadinim. It sounds like you're showing favoritism to one side. So mikar my savar osayv my savar. So mikar savar umibisarcha l'tesalam. So when it comes to your own flesh, because he shouldn't close your eyes. Give good advice. At the end, when he had charata, when he had regret, he realized that he shouldn't have done that. Okay, fine. Next Mishnah, low cost of law. Now, again, certain things need to be given, even if it's not written in the ksuba. It's tonight based. It doesn't matter. For example. Well, Kosovo, he didn't write. Bin dichrin dahabil chilmi noi non yursin kesek ksivosech yosera al chulokoin tim achuhoin. So even if you didn't write this, but your bin dichrin, your male sons, which is referring to, let's say, for example, a man has 2 wives, and they have boys. Now, in the situation where the wife dies first and then the husband dies. So the question is, how do we divide the Yerusha? So you can think, well, you should divide up the Yerusha 50-50. But when it comes to B'nai Dichrin, so what we're doing is we're saying that each of the children, each of these sides, the children of these two wives, they will yarish the mother's ksuba. And therefore, because there's an obligation to have to pay the ksuba, which may not necessarily be the same from one to the other, they may be two different amounts, so that is something in which we apply. So chayev, so in that case, even if it wasn't written, that still applies. Shehu Tanai Basin. There's a Tanai Basin that, again, if the mother dies first, the woman dies first, and then the husband, so we say that we have to honor the ksuvos of each of these two women, so that those monies will be first divided up, however, and then afterwards the rest could be divided equally. Let's say you didn't write Banan Nukvin, your daughters, do I have the lichimi that we have for me? You have in Yasam and Basi, they can stay in my house. Umitznan Manichse, and they will get mazonos. Until they get married. Chayev Shutanai Basin doesn't make any difference, as we mentioned before. There's a chiyuv mazonos to provide for your daughters, even after the person has died. They still have to make sure they get that. If let's say you didn't write at you, referring to my wife, to hey Yasam Basi, you can stay in my house. Umitzana Manichse. And you can also get mazonos kol yamei megar al munosaych, as long as you remain as an almana. Bevesi chayev shehu tanai beistin. So until she collects her ksuba, she could elect, apparently according to this, to stay there and act as an almana, and she can therefore live there and also get mazonos. That it sounds like it's on her choice whether or not she wants to leave, and therefore she can always decide to collect her ksuba, or she can stay and continue to get mazonos and live in the estate. Achi go hoyakaisin kanchi Yerushalayim. Achi Yehuda hoyakaisin achi yutza hayorshim litin loch ksuba sech. That the yorshim can give the ksuba. In other words, it's not on the woman to decide when she wants to leave, but the Yisraelim could automatically just give off the ksuba, and then they won't have to have her stay or have her get any more mazonos. They can just pay off. They can pay off the ksuba. As we said, therefore, if the Yershim want, they can just give the ksuba, and there will be potter. What is the whole purpose of this ksubas bin dichrin? So a person should jump and write for his daughter kivnai. He would want to be able to give a dowry for his daughter, but maybe he's not going to want to. So we think about it like this. Since in the ksuba, the father-in-law writes a dowry, in the ksuba, it also mentions the amount of money that the father is giving. So he wants it to stay with his daughter's children, his daughter's sons, after the husband, the son-in-law, later dies, and not for it to be distributed among the other kids from a different wife. So if we want the father, the grandfather, I guess, to give to his daughter monies, substantial dowry, he's not going to want to do it if he knows that when when his daughter dies, and the husband dies, that it's all going to be given to people who are not even related to him. So therefore, we want to make sure that whatever's in the ksuba is done. So whatever monies were brought into the marriage as a part of a dowry, that is part of the Yerusha for those boys specifically. Mara says, 1 second. Midi. Actually, before we even go weiter, let's look at question 10. I'm going to jump something. Ha'im yarshim chayavim l'rape es imam ha'almana b'nechsei avihim. Does the yarshim have to provide healing? So the answer is they're chayav. Rav Shemuel says your poiter b'rafua sheish lo kitzba. If you have a refuah which has a set amount, refuah sheish lo kitzba near nisrapes miksubasa. So that can be collected from the ksuba. Okay. All right, let's continue. So that's the reason why we have ksubas v'nidichin. Umi'ika midi, the Rachmana oimer bra leirus bartaloterus. I don't understand. The Torah says that the boys inherit and the girls don't. Yasser Rabbanan Masakni de Terus Barta, and all of a sudden the Ksubas Mendichrin, we're saying that it goes to the daughter, because what does it mean? It goes to the daughter and to her children, to her sons. Doesn't make sense. Well, it should all be divided equally. How do the Rabbanan have the right to create a Tanai based in to say that there's a Ksubas Mendichrin? So Hanami Deraisahu. This is actually also Din Deraisa. Why? Dechsiv. Kachu Nashim, take wives, v'holidu banim, they'll have sons, ubanais. Uchu of neichem nashim, v'yasmonasehim tenu anashim. Abishlam abanim biyade kaime. So it comes to children or men having kids, men getting married. It's in their hands. The men are the ones that initiate. El benase mi kaiman biyade. What ability does a man have to marry off his daughters? She is the one who's passive. The husband is the one who gives the kedushin, hakamashmon. So it teaches us a very important concept. It teaches us the nalbisha, that you should give your daughter nice clothing, the nichsa, and have her covered nicely. When Nesla meeting, give her something, so people will jump upon her, so that people will want to marry her. So it's saying that part of the way that you're able to get your daughter to be more marketable is to provide nice clothing for her, to give her things, and to also contribute to a dowry. So that will be an attraction for a man to know that his wife is someone who is well taken care of. Obviously, it also shows that she has a strong family background, that the parents care about their daughter. Viad kama. The question is, how much should a person give from his own for a dowry? So by Rabbi Tavayu ad isur nichse, up to 10% of your possessions, which obviously again shows the tremendous amount of care that families had, that they would actually give 10% of their entire wealth to their daughters. The aim, the av lerus, the balo lerus. Why don't we say that the father inherits and the husband doesn't inherit? So let's say when we're talking about the 100 or the 200, what the husband puts into the ksuba, why do the Yorshim get this? So imkain avnami mimna v'oikasav, because otherwise, if it wasn't for the fact of this, again, the father, they would not give, they would withhold and not write. They wouldn't give this amount. Ve'ema heichad kasav av lichtav bal heichad loy kasav av loy lichtav bal. Lo polig rabbanon. So he said that it doesn't make any distinction. So bas bein habanim nami terus. Why only by male sons? It should be even if she only has daughters. Why don't we say benin dichrin? Why don't we say also benin nikvin? We should also say this should be the same thing. Why is it only by if my daughter has sons? Shouldn't it be also if my daughter has daughters? Nami terus. So kenachla shavuya rabbanon. The rabbanon compare it to the same dinim of nachla. And Rashi says the yurtun tanan bein basi reshus bein habanim, that because there's other sons from the other marriage, but still this man who died has sons, so she will not be able to inherit. The only way it'll work is ksuvas bin dechrin, that if there's a link to the sons. So bas bein habanos terus. What if, let's say, the other side only there's only daughters? So again, lo pol rabbanon. The rabbanon don't make any distinction, and therefore it's only ksubas bin dichrin. It can only be with sons. Why only from karka? Maybe she should be able to collect also from metaltal. Says Rashi, why kivanda time mishum nedunis avi ha'im, who, if in fact it's like a dowry. So says Rashi, Kashem she'en habanim yarshim el mekarka. We know that boys can only inherit from land. V'kamina b'ksuvas bin indechrin. So we say kiksuva shabarabanan because it's comparable to a ksuva, and the metaltalin of the Yisomim is not meshubed to the star. So titraif mishabadi. Maybe we should also say that there's could be a lien on this. So yirtun tanan. Yirtun means it was a nachala. Says Rashi, ve'ein Yerusha mishubadim. So because it's a Yerusha land which you received through Yerusha, there's no shibud on that. Ve'em afal gabdoleka moiser dinner. Maybe this is even if there's no leftover money. But makam to come yikara nachal deraisel tikkun rabbanon. So the place in which originally was nachal deraisel, the rabbanon were not masakin it. Fine. I'm going to stop there. Let's look at rabbanon. Okay, we'll continue next time with that story about Papa. Let's see question 11. Lamai nafkamina b'ha da'omer da'amrut the kanas bin indichrin kenachla shabar rabbanon. What difference why it's a nachla? So the Einon el labanim, the Einon el I don't know how this is written, v'lo labanis. So basically, the fact that we don't say because it's kanachla, so it's only bas bein habanim. A bas bein habanim will not be yarish because again it falls under this category of. It's like a nachal, like a Yerusha. Yerusha is only for boys. Also, the ein gaiva mishabadi that they cannot collect from the chasim mishabadim. So if there's a lien, so you can't, as a Yerusha, say, "Oh, I'm entitled to get this land." We don't say that when it comes to Yerusha. So there's no shibud on the land. Let's see if maybe there's another question here. TA 6. Okay, so we had this already. So this was actually question 10. Let me just write this over here. TA6. So this is what he writes. If we're talking about that it's not a set amount, then it has the same din of mazonos. However, yesh lo kitzba is a set amount. It's a machlokas tanoim, the Tanakama and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Fine. TB 7. Elu beis dinim b'ksuvas ben dichrin navkulan medirtoin tanan de l'shavas rabban l'Yerusha. Which is, again, a similar question to what we just said before. So the answer is, first of all, she'ein ksuvas bin dichrin labas ben abanim, which is much more clearly written, and shul tarfa mishubadi adkan.